The Mafia boss was stepping out of his car when something small tapped his hand. Not a gun, not a knife, a crumpled $5 bill. He looked down. A little girl stood in front of him, hair messy, shoes worn thin, both hands shaking as she held the money up like it was everything she owned. "Please," she said quietly, "this is all I have." His men moved instantly, too close, too fast. But he raised his hand, stopping them. No one paid him $5. People paid him in fear. He crouched down, eye level with her. "What do you want, kid?" She swallowed hard, forcing the words out. "I want you to help me," she said, "because the police won't." That made him pause. She leaned closer, voice trembling. "They said if I told anyone, my mom wouldn't come home." That's when he noticed her knuckles, bruised, her sleeve torn, and the way she kept glancing over her shoulder. The Mafia boss slowly took the $5, not because he needed it, but because whatever she was about to ask was worth far more than money. "Stay with me until the end," because what this little girl asked next shocked even a man who thought he'd seen every kind of evil. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get started. Vincent Torino had been running the East Side for 15 years. He'd built his reputation on two things: keeping his word and making problems disappear. His territory stretched from the docks to downtown, and everyone knew the rules. You paid on time, you stayed quiet, and you never brought children into business. That Tuesday evening started like any other. Vincent was leaving his restaurant, Bella Vista, after settling accounts with the local shop owners. Protection money, loan payments, the usual collections that kept his operation running smooth. His black Cadillac waited at the curb, engine purring, while Tony and Marco flanked the entrance like human shields. The neighborhood knew this routine. When Vincent emerged at 8:30 sharp, people found somewhere else to be. Store owners locked their doors. Mothers called their kids inside, and the smart ones crossed the street before he even noticed them. But this little girl didn't cross the street. She didn't run. She walked straight toward him with that crumpled bill clutched in her tiny fist. Vincent had seen desperate people before. Grown men who owed money they couldn't pay. Business owners behind on protection fees. Gamblers who'd bet their last dollar on the wrong horse. Desperation had a smell, a look, a way of making people do stupid things. This was different. This child wasn't desperate in the way adults get desperate. She was methodical, determined, like she'd rehearsed this moment 100 times in her head. Her clothes were clean but old, patched in places where they'd torn. Her sneakers had holes near the toes. But her eyes held something Vincent rarely saw anymore. Pure, unwavering hope. "What's your name?" he asked, still crouched at her level. His men shifted nervously behind him, hands instinctively moving toward their jackets. They'd never seen their boss take this much time with anyone, let alone a kid. "Sophie," she whispered. "Sophie Martinez. Sophie Martinez," Vincent repeated slowly. "How old are you, Sophie?" 7. Her voice got smaller with each answer, but she didn't back away. "Almost 8. Vincent glanced at Tony, who gave an almost imperceptible shrug. In their world, children meant complications. Children meant witnesses, questions, heat from law enforcement that nobody wanted. Smart criminals avoided kids entirely. "Where are your parents, Sophie?" Vincent asked gently. That's when the tears started. Not the dramatic sobbing you'd expect from a scared child, but quiet tears that rolled down her cheeks while she fought to keep talking. "My mom's gone," she said. "They took her 3 days ago." Vincent felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Who took her?" Sophie looked over her shoulder again, scanning the empty street like she expected someone to jump out of the shadows. "The bad men. They said she owed them money, but she doesn't have any money. We don't have any money except this." She held up the $5 bill again, and Vincent could see it was worn soft from being folded and unfolded countless times. Probably her lunch money for the week, maybe longer. "These bad men, Vincent said carefully. What did they look like? Sophie wiped her nose with the back of her hand. Big. Scary. One had a tattoo on his neck that looked like a snake. Another one had gold teeth. They drove a white van with no windows in the back. Vincent's jaw tightened. He knew exactly who she was describing. The Kozlov brothers had been moving into his territory for months, pushing drugs, running protection rackets, generally making life difficult for everyone. But taking someone's mother was a new low, even for them. Sophie, where's your dad? Vincent asked. He died last year. Car accident. She said it matter-of-factly, like she'd practiced explaining this to adults who always asked uncomfortable questions. It's just me and Mom now. Was just me and Mom. Marco stepped forward. Boss, we should go. Someone's gonna see. Vincent silenced him with a look. In 15 years of running crews, settling disputes, and managing territory, he'd developed rules that kept him alive and out of prison. Rule number 1 was never get emotional about business. Rule number 2 was never trust anyone completely. Rule number 3 was never, ever get involved with kids. But looking at Sophie Martinez, clutching her $5 like it could buy miracles, Vincent felt something shift inside his chest. Maybe it was remembering his own mother, who'd worked 3 jobs to keep him fed after his father disappeared. Maybe it was thinking about all the times he'd wished someone, anyone, would step up when the world felt too big and too cruel. Sophie, what exactly do you want me to do? He asked. She took a deep breath, like she was about to jump off a cliff. I want you to bring my mom home. I know you're important. I know people are scared of you, but I also know you help people sometimes. Vincent raised an eyebrow. Who told you that? Mrs. Chen from the corner store. She said when those other bad men tried to make her pay extra money, you made them go away. She said you protect people in the neighborhood. Vincent almost smiled despite himself. Mrs. Chen had been paying him protection money for 5 years, but apparently she'd put her own spin on the arrangement. Sophie, this isn't how these things work. You can't just walk up to people like me and ask for help. But I did, she said simply. And you're still here talking to me. That stopped him cold. She was right. Any other night, any other person, Vincent would have been in his car and gone by now. His men were probably wondering if their boss had lost his mind, standing on the sidewalk negotiating with a second grader. The bad men said if I tell the police, they'll hurt Mom worse. Sophie continued. They said if I tell anyone, they'll make sure I never see her again. But they didn't say I couldn't hire someone to help. Vincent stared at this tiny girl who just used the word hire like she was conducting business. You want to hire me? Yes, for $5. It's all I have, but I can get more. I can do chores or sell things or… Sophie. Vincent's voice was gentle but firm. $5 isn't enough for what you're asking. Her face crumpled, and for a moment she looked exactly like what she was, a terrified 7-year-old whose world had been turned upside down. Please, she whispered. She's all I have. If something happens to her, I'll be all alone, and I don't know what to do when I'm alone. I'm alone. Vincent looked at that $5 bill in his hand, then back at Sophie's tear-streaked face. In his line of work, emotions were weaknesses that got you killed or arrested. But standing there, listening to this kid talk about being alone, something inside him cracked. Tell me exactly what happened 3 nights ago, he said quietly. Sophie wiped her eyes and straightened up, like she was trying to be brave. Mom was making dinner. Spaghetti. She always makes spaghetti on Sunday nights because it's cheap and there's enough for leftovers. Someone knocked on the door really hard, like they were going to break it down. Vincent nodded. Go on. Mom looked through the peephole and got scared. Really scared. She told me to hide in the bedroom closet and not come out no matter what I heard, but I could hear everything through the walls. The little girl's voice got smaller as she continued. They said my dad owed them money before he died. $20,000. They said Mom had to pay it back or they'd take me instead. Vincent's blood went cold. 20,000 was nothing to him. Pocket change he spent on dinner some nights. But to a widow working minimum wage jobs, it might as well have been 20 million. My mom told them we don't have that kind of money. She showed them our bank account on her phone. $43. That's all we had. Tony shifted behind Vincent, checking his watch. They had other business tonight, collections to make, territory to patrol. But Vincent held up his hand again. What did they say then? They laughed. Said she could work it off. Special work. And when she said no, they grabbed her. She screamed at me to stay hidden, to be brave, to find someone who could help. Sophie's voice cracked on the last word, but she kept going. They put her in the white van. One of them said they'd be back in 3 days for an answer. That was 3 days ago. Tonight, Vincent felt his jaw clench. The Kozlov brothers weren't just moving drugs and running scams. They were trafficking people. In his neighborhood. Under his nose. Sophie, where have you been staying these 3 nights? In our apartment. I know how to make peanut butter sandwiches. And we had some crackers. I've been waiting for Mom to come home. But she hasn't. Vincent exchanged a look with Marco. A 7-year-old had been living alone for 3 days, surviving on crackers and hope, while her mother was God knows where. Why me? Vincent asked. Why did you come to me instead of calling the police or child services or… Because Mrs. Chen said you're the only one the bad men are scared of, Sophie interrupted. She said when you tell someone to do something, they do it. And she said you have rules about hurting families. Vincent almost laughed. His reputation for protecting families had more to do with keeping heat off his operations than any moral code. But somehow this kid had seen through the violence and fear to something he'd forgotten was there. Sophie, what you're asking me to do could be very dangerous. These men, they're not just bad. They're evil. They hurt people for fun. If I help you, there might be fighting. People might get hurt. Sophie looked up at him with those wide brown eyes. Will you get hurt? The question caught him off guard. When was the last time someone had worried about his safety? His own men followed him out of loyalty and fear, but they knew the risks. This little girl was asking if he'd be okay. I'll be fine, he said softly. But Sophie, if I do this, if I help you get your mom back, you can never tell anyone. Not the police, not your teachers, not your friends. Do you understand? Sophie nodded so hard her hair bounced. I promise, I swear on my mom's life. Vincent stood up slowly, his knees protesting. At 45, he was feeling every year he'd spent on the streets. But looking down at Sophie Martinez, he felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Purpose. Tony, he said without turning around. Call Sal. Tell him to bring the car. Around to the back. Marco, get on the radio. I want every crew member we have on standby. Full weapons. Boss? Tony said carefully. We talking about hitting the Kozlovs? Over a kid? Vincent turned around, and both men took an involuntary step back. They'd seen their boss angry before, but this was different. This was personal. We're talking about cleaning up our neighborhood, Vincent said quietly. The Kozlovs have been pushing boundaries for months. Taking somebody's mother crosses every line we have. He looked back down at Sophie. Kid, I'm gonna ask you to do something very brave. Can you handle brave? Sophie nodded again. I need you to go to Mrs. Chen's store. Tell her Vincent sent you and you need to stay there until I come get you. Don't leave that store for any reason. Don't talk to anyone except Mrs. Chen. Can you do that? You're really gonna help me? Sophie's voice was barely a whisper. Vincent knelt down one more time and gently placed his hand on her shoulder. Sophie, I give you my word. Your mother will be home tonight. Tears started flowing down her cheeks again, but this time they were different. Relief, hope, gratitude all mixed together. Thank you, she sobbed. Thank you so much. Don't thank me yet, Vincent said, standing up. Thank me when you're having breakfast with your mom tomorrow morning. Sophie started walking toward Mrs. Chen's store, then stopped and turned back. Mr. Vincent, what if they come looking for me? Vincent smiled, and for the first time in years, it reached his eyes. Then they'll have to go through me first. As Sophie disappeared into the corner store, Vincent pulled out his phone and started making calls. The Kozlov brothers had made a fatal mistake. They'd hurt a child in his territory. They'd taken someone's mother. They'd pushed too far. Sal, it's me. Round up everyone. We're going to war. Within 20 minutes, Vincent's entire operation was in motion. Phone calls went out across the city like ripples in dark water. Crews from the docks, enforcers from downtown, specialists who handled the kind of problems that required permanent solutions. By 9:15, 37 men had assembled in the back room of Bella Vista restaurant. These weren't ordinary criminals. Vincent handpicked every member of his organization based on two criteria: absolute loyalty and the ability to handle business without creating unnecessary heat. Ex-military, former cops who'd crossed lines they couldn't uncross. Men who understood that some jobs required surgical precision. "Listen up," Vincent said, standing at the head of a long table covered with maps, photos, and weapons. "The Kozlov brothers have been testing us for months. Tonight, they crossed a line that doesn't exist." He placed a photo of Sophie on the table. Several men shifted uncomfortably. Children changed everything in their world. 7 years old, mother taken 3 days ago. The Kozlovs are demanding $20,000 her dead father supposedly owed them. But this isn't about money. It's about respect. It's about territory. It's about the fact that these animals think they can operate in our neighborhood without consequences. Tony cleared his throat. "Boss, intelligence says they're holed up in that warehouse complex by the river, the one with all the shipping containers. Perfect place to keep people if you don't want them found." Vincent nodded. "How many? 12, maybe 15? Armed but sloppy? They're not expecting trouble? Definitely not expecting us." "Good." Vincent's voice was ice-cold steel. "Here's how this works. We go in quiet. We get the woman out alive. Anyone who put their hands on her doesn't walk out. Anyone who even looked at her wrong doesn't walk out. The Kozlov brothers specifically, they get special treatment." Sal, Vincent's oldest lieutenant, spoke up. "What about witnesses? Other victims they might have? We get everyone out. Clean house completely. Make sure nothing like this ever happens again in our territory." The men around the table nodded. They'd done this dance before, but never for reasons like this. Usually, it was business. Territory disputes, unpaid debts, disrespect that required violent correction. This felt different, personal. Vincent pulled out his phone and showed them the text he'd received 10 minutes earlier. A photo of a woman tied to a chair in what looked like a shipping container. Rosa Martinez, Sophie's mother, alive, but clearly terrified. "They sent this thinking it would scare me into paying ransom," Vincent said quietly. "They were wrong." Marco studied the photo. "I know this place. Container yard near the old steel mill. Lots of hiding spots, but only 2 ways in or out. If we move fast, we can lock it down before anyone escapes." "Perfect." Vincent began distributing weapons from a duffel bag. "Sal, take 8 men and cover the north entrance. Marco, 6 men on the south side. Tony, you're with me. We go through the front door." "What about police response?" one of the younger men asked. Vincent smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "The police don't patrol that area after dark. Too dangerous. Besides, this will be over before anyone thinks to call them." As his men prepared their equipment, Vincent stepped outside into the cool night air. Mrs. Chen's store was still lit up, and he could see Sophie sitting behind the counter, probably trying to stay awake. The kid had been through hell, but she'd been smart enough to find the one person in the neighborhood who could actually help her. His phone buzzed. Another text from the Kozlovs. This time it was a video. Vincent watched Rosa Martinez trying to speak into the camera, her voice barely audible over her captor's laughter. "Tell Sophie I love her. Tell her to be brave. Tell her I'm sorry I couldn't protect her better." Vincent deleted the video immediately. Some things were too cruel to exist, even on a phone. "Boss!" Tony appeared beside him. "Everything ready. Vehicles loaded, routes planned. We can be there in 15 minutes. "Change of plans," Vincent said, pocketing his phone. "I want to be there in 10. The convoy moved through the city like ghosts. 3 black SUVs, windows tinted, license plates that would lead nowhere if anyone bothered to check. They took side streets, avoided traffic cameras, used routes Vincent had memorized over 15 years of staying one step ahead of law enforcement. The warehouse district was exactly what you'd expect from a place where people disappeared. Abandoned buildings, broken streetlights, the kind of neighborhood where screaming wouldn't bring help because everyone knew better than to get involved. Vincent's SUV pulled up 2 blocks away from the container yard. Through binoculars, he could see lights in 3 different shipping containers, guards walking patrol routes, but casually, like they were bored. The Kozlovs had gotten comfortable operating in his territory. That was about to change. "Sal's team in position," came the voice through his earpiece. "North side secured. Marco here, south entrance covered. 2 guards eliminated quietly, bodies concealed." Vincent checked his weapon one final time. A .45 caliber pistol he'd carried for 8 years, custom grip, never missed what he aimed at. Tonight, he planned to aim at everything that moved. "Tony, you ready for this?" "Been ready since that kid showed up with $5, Tony replied. "Nobody hurts children in our neighborhood." "Nobody," Vincent smiled grimly. This was why he'd built his organization carefully, choosing men who understood honor even in a dishonorable business. They weren't just criminals. They were protectors, guardians of something bigger than themselves. "All teams go." They moved like shadows across the container yard. Years of coordinated operations had taught them to communicate without words, to anticipate each other's movements, to strike with precision that left no room for mistakes. The first guard went down before he could draw his weapon. The second managed to reach for his radio, but never got the chance to use it. By the time Vincent reached the first shipping container, 6 Kozlov soldiers were already neutralized. Inside the container, they found what Vincent expected and hoped they wouldn't. Evidence of human trafficking on a scale that made his blood boil. Photos, documents, a ledger showing dozens of transactions involving people sold like merchandise. "Boss?" Marco's voice crackled through the earpiece. "Found her. Container 7. She's alive but barely conscious. Looks like they drugged her. Anyone with her?" 3 guards. "Not anymore." Vincent felt something inside his chest loosen slightly. Rosa Martinez was alive. That meant he could keep his promise to Sophie. "Sal, what's your status?" "Container 12. You need to see this. They've got 4 other women here, all in bad shape." Vincent closed his eyes briefly. The Kozlovs hadn't just taken Rosa. They were running a full operation, kidnapping women, probably planning to ship them overseas. In his territory, under his nose. Get everyone out. Medical attention for anyone who needs it. Safe transportation to wherever they want to go. Full protection until this is over. What about the Kozlov brothers themselves? Vincent checked his watch. 11:47. Sophie had been waiting 4 hours for news about her mother. 4 hours too long. Container 15. That's their office. That's where we finish this. The walk to Container 15 felt like a funeral march. Vincent had killed before, but always for business reasons. Territory disputes, unpaid debts, threats to his organization. This was different. This was justice for a 7-year-old girl who'd offered him everything she owned to save her mother. The brothers were exactly what Vincent expected. Dmitry Kozlov, the older one, was counting money when Vincent's team breached the container. Alexei Kozlov, the younger brother, was on the phone arranging another pickup. Both men reached for weapons when they saw Vincent. Neither made it. "Vincent Torino," Dmitry said, hands slowly rising. "We can work this out. Business is business." "You're right," Vincent replied calmly. "Business is business. And your business just ended. The woman, she's worth $20,000 to us. We split it 60-40, you get the bigger cut. Everyone walks away happy." Vincent stepped closer. "Let me tell you about that woman. Her name is Rosa Martinez. She's a widow. She works 2 jobs to support her 7-year-old daughter. Her husband died in a construction accident last year, and she's been struggling to keep food on the table ever since." The brothers exchanged glances. They clearly hadn't expected Vincent to know personal details. "Tonight, that 7-year-old daughter walked up to me and offered me $5 to help her. $5. Everything she had in the world. Because you animals took her mother. Look, we didn't know she was connected to you, Alexei said quickly. This is a misunderstanding. We can make this right. Vincent pulled out his phone and showed them the video they'd sent earlier. Rosa Martinez, terrified and helpless, begging for her daughter's safety. You made her record this. You laughed while she cried. You threatened a child. It was just business, Dmitri insisted. Nothing personal. You're wrong, Vincent said quietly. This couldn't be more personal. What happened next took exactly 90 seconds. When it was over, the Kozlov brothers' trafficking operation was permanently closed. The warehouse fell silent except for the sound of Vincent's men securing the area and helping the rescued women. Vincent walked back to Container 7, where Tony was helping Rosa Martinez to her feet. She was weak, disoriented, but alive. Her eyes focused on Vincent with confusion. "Who are you?" she whispered. "I'm a friend of your daughter's," Vincent said gently. "Sophie's waiting for you at Mrs. Chen's store. She's been very brave." Rosa started crying. Not from fear or pain, but from relief. "Sophie, is she okay? Did they hurt her?" "She's fine, scared, but fine. She's the reason you're safe right now." "I don't understand." Vincent helped Rosa toward the exit. "Your daughter came to me tonight. She offered me $5 to help you. Bravest thing I've ever seen." As they walked through the container yard, Rosa looked around at the aftermath. She was smart enough to understand what had happened, even if she didn't know the details. "You killed people for us," she said quietly. "I protected my neighborhood," Vincent corrected. "There's a difference." "Why? You don't know us. We're nobody." Vincent stopped walking and looked at this woman who'd survived 3 days of hell because her 7-year-old daughter refused to give up hope. "Rosa, you raised a child who walked up to the most dangerous man in the neighborhood and asked for help. Not because she was stupid or reckless, but because she knew right from wrong and was willing to risk everything to save you. That makes you somebody very special." They reached Vincent's SUV. Tony opened the door while Sal coordinated cleanup operations behind them. By morning, there would be no evidence that the Kozlov brothers had ever existed. "What happens now?" Rosa asked. "Now you go home. You hug your daughter. You try to forget this ever happened. And you? What do you get out of this?" Vincent thought about that question as they drove through the empty streets toward Mrs. Chen's store. What did he get out of risking his organization, his reputation, his carefully maintained peace with other criminal families? He got to keep a promise to a 7-year-old girl who believed the world could be good if the right people cared enough to make it good. That seemed like enough. Like enough. Mrs. Chen's store had never felt so bright. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead while Sophie sat behind the counter, her small legs swinging back and forth from a chair that was too tall for her. She'd been staring at the door for what felt like forever, jumping every time someone walked past on the sidewalk. Mrs. Chen kept offering her crackers and juice boxes, but Sophie's stomach was twisted too tight to eat anything. She just wanted her mom. She wanted this nightmare to be over. When the door chimed at midnight, Sophie's heart nearly stopped. But instead of the bad men with gold teeth and snake tattoos, Vincent Torino walked through the entrance with the most beautiful sight she'd ever seen. Her mother. "Mama!" Sophie launched herself off the chair and ran faster than she'd ever run in her life. Rosa Martinez caught her daughter and held her so tight it hurt. But Sophie didn't care. She breathed in her mother's familiar smell, lavender soap and the vanilla perfume she wore on special occasions. "Baby, oh my baby," Rosa whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I left you alone." "I wasn't alone," Sophie said, her voice muffled against her mother's shoulder. "Mr. Vincent helped me, just like I knew he would." Rosa looked up at Vincent, who stood quietly by the door with Tony. Mrs. Chen had retreated to the back of the store, giving them privacy for this reunion. "How can I ever thank you?" Rosa asked. Vincent reached into his pocket and pulled out the crumpled $5 bill Sophie had given him. He walked over and gently placed it in Sophie's small hand. "Your payment's been refunded," he said with a slight smile. Consider the job completed at no charge. Sophie looked down at the money, then back up at Vincent. But I hired you. That was our deal. Kid, you gave me something worth more than money tonight. What? Vincent knelt down to Sophie's level one last time. You reminded me why I do what I do. Sometimes we forget that protecting people isn't just about business. Sometimes it's about doing what's right. Sophie carefully folded the $5 bill and put it in her pocket. Will the bad men come back? No, Vincent said with absolute certainty. They won't be bothering anyone ever again. Rosa understood what that meant, but she didn't ask for details. Some questions were better left unanswered. What happens now? Rosa asked. Vincent stood up, his expression serious. You go home. You lock your doors. You live your life. But Rosa, if anyone ever threatens you or Sophie again, you call this number. He handed her a simple business card with just a phone number printed on it. Day or night, no questions asked. I can't pay you if something happens again. You don't need to. Sophie's already paid for a lifetime of protection. Tony stepped forward. Boss, we should go. Cleanup's finished, but we need to make sure everything's secure. Vincent nodded, then looked back at Sophie. You take care of your mom, okay? And Sophie, remember what you learned tonight. Sometimes the right person will help you, even when the world feels scary. You just have to be brave enough to ask. I will, Sophie promised solemnly. As Vincent and Tony headed toward the door, Sophie called out, Mr. Vincent! He turned back. Are you a good guy or a bad guy? Vincent paused, considering the question. In his world, the lines between good and bad weren't always clear. He'd done terrible things to terrible people. He'd broken laws, hurt enemies, operated outside society's rules for 15 years. But tonight, he'd saved a mother and daughter. He'd kept a promise to a 7-year-old girl who believed in him when she had nowhere else to turn. I'm whatever I need to be, he said finally. Tonight, I got to be the good guy. After they left, Rosa and Sophie walked the 6 blocks home to their small apartment, the same route Sophie had taken alone 3 days ago, terrified and desperate. Now she held her mother's hand tight, both of them alive and safe. 3 months later, Vincent was having dinner at Bella Vista when Mrs. Chen walked in with a small envelope. Inside was a hand-drawn picture of a family, stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. At the bottom, in careful 7-year-old handwriting, it read, Thank you, Mr. Vincent. Love, Sophie and Mama. Vincent never framed awards or newspaper clippings, but that drawing went up on his office wall, right next to the map of his territory. Because sometimes the most dangerous man in the neighborhood needs to remember what he's really protecting. Sophie Martinez grew up safe. She graduated high school, went to college, became a teacher. Every year on the anniversary of that night, she'd leave a small envelope at Bella Vista restaurant. Always the same thing. A $5 bill and a note that said, for the next kid who needs help. Vincent kept every single one, because that's the thing about courage. It doesn't matter how big you are, how much money you have, or how many people fear your name. Sometimes the bravest person in the room is a 7-year-old girl with $5 and hope. And sometimes that's exactly what the world needs.